According to Mullah Maudud, the ordinary citizens of the Islamic states have the right to elect the president and to be members of the parliament. We covered this in the first part of the session. He endorses the whole array of liberal and social democratic rights, which are subset of human rights. Although sometimes human rights is equated with liberal rights. Life, property, consciousness, association, welfare. Mullah Maudud doesn't recognize, so that's our critique of him on that. Human rights as negation of حقوق العباد. That is duties of a capitalist state to foster capitalist individuality in civil society and universalize avarice and covetousness. Okay, that's a very heavy passage, so I'll spend the rest of the time on this. So the basic values of modern liberal and humanistic Western civilizations is freedom, equality. And this freedom can be conceptualized at the level of individual or society or species. And so that would be individual freedom. So that's mostly liberalism. Social democracy is a part of liberalism in a sense, although it has some resemblance with others. And this is, you would have nationalism and other types of socialism like social democracy. You will bring it here as well. And the third type is speciesism. So Marxism is one type of speciesism, but there are others too, like humanism. At this species level would be humanistic ideology. So that's the basis. And now human rights come here. Human rights are the institutional and embodiment of these basic values, the value of freedom. So depending on your conception of your conceptualization of freedom, whether it's individual level or social level, you would have individual rights, or you would have social rights, national rights, or species level rights. Okay. Now rights are always, whether they are human rights or non-human rights, rights are always there to facilitate the fulfillment of basic duty or duties within a particular civilization. And human rights, or particular types of rights, are the rights which are the instruments and means of fulfilling a basic duty of the humanistic civilization. And the basic duty within a humanistic civilization, humanism, is self-worship. That's called autonomy as well. And whether, depending on different ideologies of humanism, you would have self-worship in the form of individual self-worship, that's liberalism, or social self-worship, that is nationalism and its different forms, or other communitarian ideologies, or you would have a species level worship, like worship of humanity in itself. So you would have Marxism, and other form of humanisms at the species level. Some forms of environmentalism come into under that rubric, and there are other ideologies, but these are more famous one or more relevant one. Now if we understand this, then we can understand what human rights are. So human rights are those rights which are given as instruments or as resource needed to fulfill the basic duty of self-worship. That's self-worship. Either worship of the self at the individual level or social or species level. So if you don't believe in self-worship, then by definition you don't believe in human rights. And if you say that there are rights in Islam, then either you don't understand Islam or you don't understand the West or the modernity. And it's basically the misunderstanding of modernity, but that misunderstanding of modernity in turn affects your understanding of Islam as well, because you don't realize that by promoting human rights, you are really promoting a form of self-worship, albeit in your eyes within Islamic limits. So that's why you end up giving rise to Islamic liberalism, Islamic socialism, Islamic nationalism, Islamic Marxism, etc., which are all misnomers and contradiction in terms. But that's what we end up with. So the easiest way to understand that there are no human rights in Islam rejects human rights. There are no human rights, can't be any human rights in Islam, because Islam rejects self-worship, which is a form of worship of shaitan, obviously. I think I missed that portion. I don't know from where did I miss that, but let's see. I think if you understand what we said previously, then you can understand the basic distinction between human rights and حقوق العباد. The purpose of human right is to facilitate self-worship, which is basically the worship of shaitan. But the purpose of حقوق العباد, or the rights of the slaves of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, is to facilitate the worship of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, the worship of the Lord of the worlds, the worship of the Lord of Abraham and the Moses and Isa and Jesus than Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. That's the basic difference, and that's why we reject. So why we reject human rights? We reject human rights because we reject the worship of Shaitan. And we reject accept حقوق العباد because we accept the worship of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And from this we can understand that in any civilization, rights are there to facilitate basic duty. So human rights and حقوق العباد both are rights, but there are different types of human and human rights and حقوق. So this is to self-worship, and this is the worship of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And the basic duty in humanistic civilization is self-worship. That's what freedom means, autonomy. But the concrete form of freedom is capital, because in order to worship yourself you need resources. So the basic duty in concrete term is accumulation, for the sake of accumulation in humanistic. So all human rights are there to facilitate this accumulation income. On the other hand, Islam rejects accumulation, takasur. It rejects hubb ad-dunya, hubb al-mal and jah, and it is based on giving priority to akhirah over dunya, and its whole system is based on taqleel rather than accumulation, which is the exact opposite of accumulation. So the purpose of, in concrete term, the purpose of human rights is to facilitate accumulation for the sake of accumulation. On the other hand, the purpose of حقوق العباد, the rights of the slave, or حقوق العباد, is to facilitate الزهد في الدنيا, rejection of dunya, jihad, tazkiyah, reduction of your needs, reduction in your pursuit of dunya, and giving priority to akhirah, and building a civilization in which giving priority to dunya is easier and loving dunya is harder. On the other hand, the humanistic capitalistic civilization, the whole purpose is to develop a civilization in which loving dunya and accumulating dunya is easier, and giving preference to akhirah is hard. So this is the basic mistake by Maududi, to confuse, to think that حقوق العباد and human rights are the same thing. Yeah. The only thing is Islam limits human rights. That's not the case. They are totally opposite things. But in this, Maududi is not alone. Almost universally, all ulama confuse حقوق العباد and human rights because they don't understand human rights. Why don't they understand human rights? Because they don't understand Western civilization. And they don't understand Western civilization because in their curriculum they are still studying Greek philosophy and medieval philosophy, which is very good, but on that basis you can't understand modern Western civilization. So it is that's why we are begging ulama to study the West, study liberalism, nationalism, social democracy, socialism deeply at the philosophical level, at the same level at which they study Plato and Aristotle and Plotinus and all those things and Kalam books, old Kalam books, and only then they can come up with a fundamental and concrete critique of Western civilization and stop mixing Islam with these shaitani ideologies. Okay, we'll stop here, inshallah. Assalamu alaikum.